Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajak Acharya Ashtotara Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajak Acharya Ashtotara Sata Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Prem se Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Nitya Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Pade, Krishna Prasthaya Bhuta Ishmate Bhakti Vikasa Swami. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 2, titled Remembrance of Lord Krishna, text number 21. I guess we'll wait for it to get pulled up.
Is that right?
No. That's amazing. Okay. Thank you, Tapas. Okay. Svayam tu asamya atishayaha tri adhishaha Swarajya Lakshmi Apta Samasta Kamaha Balim Haradbihi Chira Loka Palahi Kirita Koti Idita Pada Pitaha Svayam Tvasamya Tishayastradishaha Svayam Tvasamya Tishayastradishaha Svarajalaksham Yapta Samasta Kamaha Svarajalaksham Yapta Samasta Kamaha Balim Haradbishchira Loka Palahi Balim Haradbishchira Loka Palahi Kirita Kotyedita Padapitaha Kirita Kotyedita Padapitaha Svayam Tvasamya Tishayastradishaha Svarajalaksham Yapta Samasta Kamaha Balim Haradbishchira Loka Palahi Kirita Kotyedita Padapitaha Svayam Tvasamya Tishayastradishaha Svarajalaksham Yapta Samasta Kamaha Balim Haradbishchira Loka Palahi Kirita Kotyedita Padapitaha Please chant.
Swayam swa asam yata Swayam swa asam yata yatishayastradisha
Swayam tvasam yatishayastryadishaha Svarajalaksham yapta samastakamaha Balim harad bishchira lokapalahi Kirita koti dita padapitaha Swayam tvasam yatishayastryadishaha Svarajalaksham yapta samastakamaha Balim harad bishchira lokapalahi Kirita koti dita padapitaha Swayam tvasam yatishayastradishaha Svarajalaksham yapta samastakamaha Valim harad bishchira lokapalahi Kirita koti dita padapitaha Swayam saradam yatishayastradishaha Svarajalaksham yapta samastakamaha Lim harad bishchira lokapalahi Kirita koti dita padapitaha Mataji's? Jayastradishaha Samastakamaha Balim harad bishchira lokapalahi Kirita koti dita padapitaha Svayam himself. 2. But. Asamya. Unique. Atishayaha. Greater. 3. Adhishaha. Lord of the three. Swarajya. Independent supremacy. Lakshmi. Fortune. Apta. Achieved. Samasta. Kamaha. All desires. Balim. Worshipping paraphernalia. Haradbihi. Offered by. Chira. Loka. Palahi. By the eternal maintainers of the order of creation. Kirita. Koti. Millions of helmets. Idita. Pada. Pitaha. Feet honored by prayers. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Lord Sri Krishna is the Lord of all kinds of threes and is independently supreme by achievement of all kinds of fortune. He is worshipped by the eternal maintainers of the creation, who offer him the paraphernalia of worship by touching their millions of helmets to his feet. Purport. Lord Sri Krishna is so mild and merciful as described in the above verses, and yet he is the Lord of all kinds of threes. He is the supreme Lord of the three worlds, the three qualities of material nature, and the three Purushas, Karanodakashaya Vishnu, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and Kshirodakashaya Vishnu. There are innumerable universes, and in each and every universe there are different manifestations of Brahma, Vishnu, and Rudra. Besides that, there is the Sheshamurti, who bears all the universes on his hoods. And Lord Krishna is the Lord of all of them. As the incarnation of Manu, he is the original source of all the Manus in innumerable universes. Each universe has manifestations of 504,000 Manus. He is the Lord of the three principal potencies, namely Chit Shakti, Maya Shakti, and Tatashta Shakti. And he is the complete master of 6 kinds of fortune: wealth, strength, beauty, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. There is none who can excel him in any matter of enjoyment, and certainly there is no one greater than him. No one is equal to or greater than him. It is the duty of everyone, whoever and wherever one may be, to surrender completely unto him. It is not wonderful, therefore, that all the transcendental controllers surrender to him and make all offerings of worship. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utaf Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vikasa Swaminiti Namine. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pashtatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Swayam tvasam ya tishayas tradishaha svaraja laksham yapta samastakamaha balim haradbishchila lokapalahi kirita kot yedita padapitaha. Lord Krishna is the Lord of all kinds of threes and is independently supreme by achievement of all kinds of fortune. He is worshipped by the eternal maintainers of creation, who offer him paraphernalia of worship by touching their millions of helmets to his feet. We are continuing reading this second chapter of the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, talking about the remembrance of Lord Krishna. And at least for myself, when I've been hearing the classes from this chapter, I've been kind of thinking about the difference between remembrance of Krishna and the effect and the personalities associated with that versus forgetfulness of Krishna and the different aspects associated with that as well. We can see, as was spoken about in the previous verse, talking about people who saw Krishna on the battlefield even though he wasn't fighting, people just who even saw him and were able to appreciate him. They actually attained a high level of liberation. And this is the result of those who remember Krishna and those who think about Krishna, that one is naturally attracted. One who is not envious of Krishna cannot help with being attracted to the name, form, qualities, and pastimes of Krishna. Versus we see those who desire to be forgetful and who have this strong desire to forget Krishna, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that he gives one knowledge, remembrance, and also forgetfulness. So one who desires to forget Krishna, Krishna allows them to do so, but it comes with a price. It isn't just that one can forget Krishna and there's no result. When one desires to forget Krishna and enjoy separately from Krishna, then they put themselves under the three modes of material nature and have to suffer according to their happiness and distress which they get from their desires. So we can see here that it's kind of all culminating to a point here. We have about 13 more verses left in this chapter, and it's all culminating to a point. And here we have just been hearing about Krishna's pastimes that he's been having on this planet and the remembrance of different personalities associated with him and different moods associated with people who remember the pastimes of Krishna. And here we hear more of the grand nature of Krishna, because Krishna is, after all, the supreme personality of Godhead. So we can see here that it's said that Lord Sri Krishna is the Lord of all kinds of threes and is independently supreme by all kinds of fortune. I know in kind of spiritual spheres, there's this whole idea of numerology. You know, people think that specific numbers have certain meanings, repetition of certain numbers have certain meanings. You know, even this number 3, people think that like 333 has like a specific meaning. There's some people that think that you know, they were like, I was born on like 333, and like I like heard from somebody at like 5:55 p.m. about this, and they think it's some like divine intervention. Similarly, some people also associate great importance with the number 9, for example. Why? Just because they're able to draw some like weird strings from here to there and somehow be like, oh yeah, well, you see, all these actually relate to the number 9. But really, there's no actual importance in this actual number. They're just drawing some kind of loose interpretation of importance over these ideas. But really, the number actually has no impact. Similarly here, this number 3 is kind of stressed, but it isn't that the number 3 in specific is by nature spiritual. Just in and of itself, the number 3 doesn't actually mean anything. But we can see with association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead that all these different manifestations in the material world that come in sets of 3, like I'll go through, which Prabhupada describes in the purport here, they actually become very amazing and very wonderful to hear about. You know, just naturally, if you just talk about sets of 3 things, like here I have 3 books here on this table, there might be 3 people in the audience, or there might be 3 preps up for the offering. But these don't actually have any importance unless they're associated with Krishna. So I'll kind of go through these various items here. And one important thing that Prabhupada begins to stress in the purport is he starts it off by saying, Lord Krishna is so mild and merciful as described in the above verses, and yet he is the Lord of all kinds of threes. So it's being described here that if you just look at the pastimes of Krishna, you know, he appears and he engages in pastimes as a cowherd boy. He walks around barefooted. He has loving exchanges with his friends. You know, they might steal his lunchbox, or they might play or joke with him. They might wrestle together. And similarly, they have very sweet, relishable pastimes. And one might see these pastimes and associate, you know, more light adjectives and verbs to describe them. So Prabhupada here uses mild and merciful. But we can see that one can't get lost in this understanding of, oh, you know, Krishna is just like a little boy. He's a cowherd boy. And then the people tend to separate the identity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from Krishna because they see, oh, Krishna is just some little boy. How can he be the Supreme Personality of Godhead? We can see there's this verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1.3.28, where it says, Ete chamsa kataf pumsa Krishnas tu bhagavan svayam indrari vyakulam lokam Mridayanti yuge yuge. Huh? Mridayanti? Oh. Mridyanti. Really? No, it's where it describes that all the above mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. But Lord Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All of them appear on planets whenever there is a disturbance created by the atheist. The Lord incarnates to protect the theist. So we can see here this Krishna's tu Bhagavan Svayam, where it's being described that there might be so many great incarnations and so many great personalities, but anything that's great is ultimately emanating from Krishna, is ultimately a plenary portion of the Lord. And that Krishna is the original manifestation of all of these things. So everything that's great that we can see in the material world, even the different incarnations of Krishna, Krishna is the original. And I'll kind of go through and describe different things about that as I go through my class. But the first thing that's described here in this purport about how, Krishna is Bhagavan, which means one who has all opulences, is that it's said that he is the supreme Lord of the three worlds. Can anyone think of a pastime of the Lord where he conquers the three worlds? Vamana, yeah. So if you could pull up the 8th canto, chapter 20, I'll just read through different translations about this pastime of how Lord Vamana, he actually conquers the three worlds. Pull it up. Yeah, I'll start at 21. Okay, there we go. Perfect. The unlimited supreme personality of Godhead, who had assumed the form of Vamana, then began increasing in size, acting in terms of the material energy until everything in the universe was within his body, including the earth, the planetary systems, the sky, the directions, the various holes in the universe, the seas, the oceans, the birds, beasts, human beings, the demigods, and great saintly persons. Bali Maharaj, along with the priests, acharyas, and members of the assembly, observed the Supreme Personality of Godhead's universal body. The body contained everything within the universe, including all the gross material elements, the senses, the sense objects, the mind, intelligence, and false ego, the various kinds of living entities, and the actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature. Thereafter, Bali Maharaj, who was occupying the seat of King Indra, could see the lower planetary systems, such as Rasatala, on the soles of the feet of the Lord's universal form. He saw on the Lord's feet the surface of the globe, on the surface of his calves all the mountains, on his knees the various birds, and on his thighs the varieties of air. Bali Maharaj saw beneath the garments of the Lord who acts wonderfully the evening twilight. In the Lord's private parts he saw the Prajapatis, and in the round portion of the waist he saw himself with his confidential associates. In the Lord's navel he saw the sky, on the Lord's waist he saw the 7 oceans, and on the Lord's bosom he saw all the clusters of stars. My dear king, on the heart of Lord Murari he saw religion, on the chest both pleasing words and truthfulness, in the mind the moon, on the bosom the goddess of fortune, with a lotus flower in her hand, on the neck all of the Vedas and all sound vibrations, on the arms all the demigods headed by King Indra, in both ears all the directions, on the head the upper planetary systems, on the hair the clouds, on the nostrils the wind, on the eyes the sun, and in the mouth fire. From his words came all Vedic mantras. On his tongue was the demigod of water, Varunadev. On his eyebrows were the regulative principles, and on his eyelids were day and night. When his eyes were open, it was daytime, and when they were closed, it was night. On his forehead was anger, and on his lips was greed. O king, his touch were lusty desires, and his semen were all the waters. On his back was irreligion, and in his wonderful activities or steps was the fire of sacrifice. On his shadow was death, in his smile was the illusory energy, and on the hairs of his body were all the drugs and herbs. In his veins were all of the rivers, on his nails were all the stones. In his intelligence were Lord Brahma, the demigods, and great saintly persons. And throughout his entire body and senses were all living entities, moving and stationary. Bali Maharaj thus saw everything in the gigantic body of the Lord. O king, when all of the demons, the followers of Maharaj Bali, saw the universal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who held everything within his body, when they saw in the Lord's hand his disc, known as the Sudarshan Chakra, which generates intolerable heat, and when they heard the tumultuous sound of his bow, all of these caused lamentation within their hearts. The Lord's conch shell, named Panchajanya, which made sounds like that of a cloud, the very forceful club named Komodaki, the sword named Vidyadhara, with a shield decorated with hundreds of moon-like spots, and also the Akshayasayaka, the best of quivers. All of these appeared together and offered prayers to the Lord. These associates, headed by Sunanda, and other chief associates accompanied by all the predominating deities of the various planets, offered prayers to the Lord, who wore a brilliant helmet, bracelets, and glittering earrings that resembled fish. On the Lord's bosom was a lock of hair called Srivatsa, and the transcendental jewel named Kaustuba. He wore a yellow garment covered by a belt, and he was decorated by a flower garland surrounded by many bees. Manifesting himself in this way, O king, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose activities are wonderful, covered the entire surface of the earth with one footstep, the sky within his body and all directions within his arms. As the Lord took his second step, he covered all of the heavenly planets, and not even a spot remained for the third step, for the Lord's foot extended higher and higher beyond Marloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, and even Satyaloka. So we can see here that when the Lord came before Bali Maharaj as his incarnation of Vamana, he appeared just as a very small brahmachari. He appeared as a young boy, and he begged from Bali Maharaj for 3 steps of land. Because generally when a brahmana comes and he asks for some charity, you generally give him anything he wants, especially someone in the position of Bali Maharaj, who, as described in those translations, was in the position of Lord Indra, the king of all of the heavens. So naturally he had access to all material opulence and was in charge of managing the 3 worlds. But when the Lord came before him as Vamanadev and asked him for 3 steps of land, generally he said, I'm in control of all this stuff. I can give you all these riches. I can give you all these foodstuffs. I can give you all these cows in charity. But Vamana insisted in only asking for 3 steps of land. And we can see just with 2 of those 3 steps, the Lord conquered the 3 worlds, which means the lower planets, the earthly planetary systems, and the heavenly planetary systems too. And it's described in the purport by Srila Prabhupada because, it just says that the Lord placed his first step on the earth. But Prabhupada describes that when you place your foot on top of something, naturally you also have access to everything below. So it isn't that the Lord had to place his foot separately on the lower planetary systems. Just by placing his foot on the earth, he also conquered the lower planetary systems. And then with his second foot, he conquered all of the higher planetary systems. So in this way, he was so easily able to display this potency of being the Lord of the 3 worlds. So next, Prabhupada talks about being the Lord of the 3 qualities. And does anyone know what these 3 qualities are, the 3 qualities of material nature? Do you know the Sanskrit as well? Good job. So we can see it's elaborately described in the Bhagavad Gita, and I'll read a couple verses here because, Prabhupada explains it so nicely. You can pull up first 14:19. This 14th chapter, it's actually titled The 3 Modes of Material Nature. So naturally I went there for my research. Let's pull it up here. The translation is, when one properly sees that in all activities no other performer is at work than these modes of nature, and he knows the Supreme Lord who is transcendental to all these modes, he attains my spiritual nature. And in the purport, Prabhupada describes that one can transcend all activities of the modes of material nature simply by understanding them properly by learning from the proper souls. The real spiritual master is Krishna, and he is imparting the spiritual knowledge to Arjuna. Similarly, one who are fully in Krishna consciousness, that one has to learn the science of activities in terms of the modes of material nature. Otherwise, one's life will be misdirected. And then, kind of at the end here, it said, a man in Krishna consciousness is not controlled by the spell of material nature. It has already been stated in the 7th chapter that one who has surrendered to Krishna is relieved from all the activities of material nature. For one who is able to see things as they are, the influence of material nature gradually ceases. A man in Krishna consciousness is not controlled by the spell of the material modes of nature. It has already been stated in the 7th chapter that one who has surrendered to Krishna is relieved from the activities of material nature. For one who is able to see things as they are, the influence of material nature gradually ceases. And then the next translation here is, when the embodied being is able to transcend these 3 modes associated with the material body, he can become free from birth, death, old age, and their diseases, and can enjoy nectar even in this life. So we can see that Krishna is actually the one who is in control of these 3 modes of material nature, and that the living entity, no matter how hard they may try, they cannot come out of these 3 modes of material nature by their own facilities, by their own work. That no matter how hard one tries, by their own effort, they can't come out of the 3 modes of material nature. Because by nature and by quality, the living entity is subordinate to Krishna's external potency. And that the living entity is put under control, is put under illusion by these 3 modes. And just naturally, you can see that a criminal might be indicted or executed under some kind of law. But the president, he can make a pardon for that individual just because he has that higher power. So similarly, one who's in the material world, naturally they have to fall under the law of these 3 modes of material nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. So one who performs action according to these qualities, they get a certain result in actions. So they have to act according to the law of those 3 modes of material nature that they're put under. But one can get the pardon of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he can be raised up out of those modes of material nature. And then he becomes free from all associations with those modes of material nature. So you can pull up 713, where this is further described, just about the 3 modes of material nature. Where it says, deluded by the 3 modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. So here Krishna is describing how one who is even under these 3 modes, he cannot know Krishna, who is actually above and who is the controller of these different modes of material nature. And then last, I'll read, you can just go to the translations here for the 9th chapter. I know the Bhaktas were learning this chapter, so they should be pretty familiar with some of these verses. I'll start with number 4, where Krishna says, by me in my unmanifested form, the entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. And yet everything that is created does not rest in me. Behold my mystic opulence. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, and although I am everywhere, I am not a part of this cosmic manifestation, for myself is the source of creation. Understand that as the mighty wind blowing everywhere rests always in the sky, all created beings rest in me. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, all material manifestations enter into my nature, and at the beginning of another millennium, by my potency I create them again. The whole cosmic order is under me. Under my will, it is automatically manifested again and again, and under my will, it is annihilated at the end. O Dhananjaya, all this work cannot bind me. I am ever detached from all these material activities, seated as though neutral. And then this material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. So we can see that Krishna is describing here that even though he may appear in the material world, and he may be the one who is organizing and constructing everything in this material world, and how everything in the material world is happening under his jurisdiction and under his order. He is aloof from all of these material things that would bind all the other conditioned souls that are present here in the material world. We can see every living entity in the material world up to the level of Lord Brahma, who is conditioned under these three modes of material nature. They're greatly affected by it. But Krishna, who is the origin of all these different material qualities, they do not affect him. So that's Krishna's nature, and that's why he is Bhagavan, because he is the Lord of all these three qualities. When one is the Lord of something, it means that they are not naturally affected by it, but rather they're in control of it. And then next it's described here, the next set of three, that it says that Krishna is the Lord of the three Purushas, namely Karana Dakashai Vishnu, Garbha Dakashai Vishnu, and Kshira Dakashai Vishnu. It is then also said that he is the Lord of the different manifestations, namely Brahma, Vishnu, and Rudra. And we can see that this is actually very in-depthly described in the Brahma Samhita, where it goes through how, Govinda, the primeval Lord, is actually the origin and is the source and the controller of all these different personalities. So I know I'm pulling up a lot of things, but you can pull up Brahma Samhita 45. You can start with that. Where it says, just as milk is transformed into curd by the action of acids, yet the effect of curd is neither the same as nor different from its cause, viz. Milk. So I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who from the state of Shambhu is transformed for the performance of work of destruction. I'll go on to the next one. The light of one candle being communicated to the other candles, although it burns separately in them, is the same in its quality. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who exhibits himself in the same mobile manner in his various manifestations. The next one. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who, assuming his own great subjective form, who bears the name of Shesha, replete with all accommodating potency, and reposing in the causal ocean with the infinity of the world in his pores of his hairs, enjoys creative sleep. Brahma and other lords of the mundane worlds, appearing from the pores of the hair of Mahavishnu, remain alive as long as the duration of one exhalation of the latter, Mahavishnu. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, of whose subjective personality Mahavishnu is the portion of portion. And the last one. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, from whom the separated subjective portion, Brahma, receives his power for the regulation of the mundane world. Just as the sun manifests some portion of his own light in the effulgent gems that bear the name Suryakanta, etc. So we can see here that it's being described where, similarly, just as, I don't know if anyone here has ever made yogurt or paneer, but they're all made from the same milk. And one can, in one sense, say that yogurt and curd, they're actually non-different from milk. But we can see that while milk is the origin of all these items, and it can create all these various things, like you can see how great the nature of milk is, because just from milk you can create so many different things. You can create ghee, butter, curd, yogurt, so many different things. Paneer. So, but when it's transformed into all these items, they cannot be transformed back into milk. So one can say that they come from the same quality and this original nature of milk, but they cannot be turned back into it. So it's being described here that Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma, they all come from this original milk. They all come from this same original position. And in one sense, they're created from the same thing as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But they don't have the same nature, the same quality. Right? We were talking about the 64 different qualities that are present in Krishna and how 78% of them are present in, or can be present in, living entities in the material world up to the level of Lord Brahma. And then we can see that Shiva has a little more qualities, Vishnu has even more qualities, but there are 4 qualities that are specific to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Does anybody remember what those 4 qualities are? Tapas? Flute? Associates? Masan? Pastimes? Beauty. So all of these 4 things, they're specific to Krishna, which is not displayed in any other incarnation or any other personality that exists in either the material or in the spiritual worlds. And this is what's being described here in this Brahma Samhita, which is actually commentated on by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that even though one might think that Shiva is so great, and one might even regard Shiva as Bhagavan, one might regard Brahma as Bhagavan, or one might regard Vishnu as Bhagavan, we can see that Bhagavan is actually Krishna, because Bhagavan means one who contains all opulences, as is described later, where it says that he is the complete master of 6 kinds of fortune: wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. So we can see that these things are only ever present, and present to the highest degree in Krishna. We can practically see that Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu, and all these other personalities in the material world, they might exhibit a small level of these qualities. We can see that one might be very famous or very beautiful, even very strong and very wealthy, but their level of knowledge and their level of renunciation might not be so high. We can also see that those who are generally highly learned and highly renounced, they don't have all these things like beauty, wealth, strength, and they generally aren't very famous. And even we can see higher and higher, we have people like Indra, Shiva, and Brahma, who have different levels of these 6 opulences. But we can see that no one has them as complete as Krishna. That's why Krishna is actually Krishna's tu Bhagavan Svayam. Krishna is actually one who should be regarded as Bhagavan. And that's what's being described there in the Brahma Samhita, that out of all these things that are created, and we can see that, the pores of, out of the pores of Mahavishnu come all these different universes, and then from the stem of the lotus flower comes Lord Brahma, and then Lord Brahma, by the Shakti, by the energy that he gets by meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, gets the power to create all of this material world. So we can see that there's different levels of creation that one can go to, and one might think, okay, maybe this person's supreme, maybe this person's supreme. But it's described here in the Brahma Samhita that from all these different creative beings and from all these supreme beings, the ultimate supreme is none other than Krishna, the primeval Lord, Govinda. So the next set of 3 that's being described here is the different 3 potencies, where it's said that the Chit Shakti, Maya Shakti, and Tatashta Shakti. So this has been described in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. If you want to pull up 7.4. So these different potencies are described here. It might not look so familiar because it's been written in that Sanskrit form, but I think once I go through these verses, it'll be pretty understandable. That Bhumirapo nalo vayu kamano buddhirevacha ahankara itiyame bhina prakritirashtata. That earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these 8 constitute my separate material energies. So here, this has been described Krishna's Maya Shakti, or his material energy. And we can practically see what this energy consists of. It consists of the earth, it consists of the water, the fire, the ether, the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. So all the things that are gross and all the things that are subtle in the material world, it's described that Krishna is the Lord of all these things. Next, in text 5, it is described, Apare yam itastvanyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam daryate jagat. That besides these, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mine, which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material nature. So this is describing the Tatashta Shakti, or the marginal Shakti. And why is it called marginal? Well, we can practically see that the living entities in this material world, they aren't the body, but they're actually the soul that's present inside of the body. And the soul by nature is spirit, just like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We all have the same spiritual qualities as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but we're different in quantity. And we can see this practically by this these words that are used, this tatashta shakti, this marginal energy. A good analogy that Srila Prabhupada would often use to describe this is sand on a beach. Generally, if you go to a beach, depending on the tide, sometimes the sand is covered, sometimes it's not covered. So we can see that this marginal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's described as this because sometimes it's covered by the material nature, and sometimes it's not. Versus Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is never covered up by this external energy. Or even when he appears to be, he is still in control of it. Versus the living entities, they have no control over whether they're under the material nature. We can see that, unfortunately in this modern society, people are proclaiming themselves as God. People say, oh yeah, I am God, and by my meditation, I make the sun rise. And I'm also God, and you're also God, and we're all God. There's this understanding that's generally out there. But you might ask, how am I God if I don't know I'm God? God means one who knows everything. So if I'm God, how do I know that I'm not God? And they're like, oh, you just don't know that you're God right now. But after engaging in some meditation and after doing some things, then you'll be able to realize that actually you're God. We can practically see that it's being described here that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, Bhagavan, he is never under the control of this covering illusory energy. Krishna's never under illusion to where he can't become free from it. We can see that through his pastimes, he voluntarily chooses to be under it's this internal potency where it allows for his pastimes to go on, but at any moment, Krishna can become free from it. We can see that this is not our nature, which is why we're put into this tatashta marginal shakti. And last, it's been described here in this 6th verse that etad yonini bhutani sarvanityupadaraya aham kritsnasya jagata prabhavav pralayas tata. That all created beings have their source in these two natures. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. So this is what distinguishes Krishna, Bhagavan, from the average or from every other living entity. That everything that is material, everything that's spiritual, everything in both this world and in the spiritual world, it all comes from this original Krishna, right? It all comes from the primeval Lord Govinda, which both everything in this material world and in the spiritual world, everything is under the complete control of Krishna. So it's been described here in this purport how Krishna is the Lord of so many different things. And one might ask, why is this so important? Why is this understanding of Krishna's tu Bhagavan Svayam actually such an important understanding to have? Why can't we just, read Krishna's pastimes in Krishna book, and, why can't we just relish those pastimes as they are? Why do we have to have this understanding of Krishna as Bhagavan? Now I'll go back to this verse that I quoted at the beginning, this Ete Chamsa Kalaf Pumsa, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Svayam, Indrari Vyakulam Lokam, Mridhayanti Yuge Yuge, where it's being described that, Krishna is this Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is the origin of everything, the origin of everything. And it's been described here in the purport. You can go to where it says, according to Srila Jiva Goswami's statement. It's the beginning of one of these paragraphs. Yeah, there we go. According to Srila Jiva Goswami's statement, in accordance with the authoritative sources, Lord Krishna is the source of all other incarnations. It is not that Krishna has any source of incarnation. All these symptoms of the Supreme Truth are full present in the person of Lord Krishna. And in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord emphatically declares that there is no truth greater or equal to himself. In this stanza, the word Svayam is particularly mentioned to confirm that Lord Krishna has no other source than himself. Although in other places the incarnations are described as Bhagavan because of their specific functions, nowhere are they declared to be the Supreme Personality. In this stanza, the word Svayam signifies the supremacy as Saman Bonam. The Saman Bonam Krishna is one without a second. He himself has expanded himself in various parts, portions, and parcels as Svayam Rupa, Svayam Prakasha, Tad Ekatma, Prabhava, Vaibhava, Vilasa, Avatara, Avesha, and Jivas, all provided with innumerable energies just suitable to the respective persons and personalities. And then it goes on to describe these 64 aspects that I was talking about. And then you can go to, it's kind of like this last section. It says, the standard of perfection. It's right above that there. Yeah, there we go. The standard of perfection for a human being is to develop up to the 78% in full. The living being can never possess attributes like Shiva, Vishnu, or Lord Krishna. The living entity can become godly by developing the 78% transcendental attributes in fullness, but he can never become a god like Shiva, Vishnu, or Krishna. He can become a Brahma in due course. The godly living beings who are all residents of the planets in the spiritual sky are eternal associates of God in different spiritual planets called Haridhamma and Maheshadhamma. The abode of Lord Krishna is above all spiritual planets and is called Krishna Loka or Goloka Vrindavan. And the perfected living being, by developing 78% of the above attributes in fullness, can enter the planet of Krishna Loka after leaving this material planet. So we can see that this is important because without this understanding, we won't recognize Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And how do we know that this can happen? How do we know that one can, even though they read the pastimes of Krishna, they might witness the pastimes of Krishna? How do we know that it's possible for one to not get the proper understanding? We can see by the pastime where Lord Brahma steals the calves and the cowherd boys of Krishna. Right? It's described in the Krishna book that Lord Brahma, he was observing the different pastimes that Krishna was undergoing in Vrindavan. And he because he's actually the original speaker of this Brahma Samhita. So it isn't like he didn't know that Govinda is the primeval Lord, and that all these different forms and everything in the material world, it ultimately comes from Krishna. But he was bewildered because he was like, how can this person who is walking around barefoot, who is having these friendly, seemingly childish interactions with his friends, how can this person be Bhagavan? And he thus decided to test Krishna by taking away the calves and taking away the cowherd boys and seeing, okay, what will Krishna do now? And then even for the split second that he was bewildered, he could see that Krishna expanded himself into all the different calves, all the different cowherd boys, and his pastimes were still able to go on like nothing was happening. So from this instant, Brahma was then able to realize that, okay, this person is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And by that, he was actually able to surrender to him. So by this understanding that Krishna is Bhagavan, then one is actually able to surrender to him because one is in full understanding that this person is actually the controller of everything. That no matter how hard I try, I'll never be the controller because Krishna will always be the supreme controller. We can practically see this also in Bhagavad Gita. Why do you think in all the verses where Krishna speaks, it says Shri Bhagavan Uvacha? Why not Shri Krishna Uvacha or Govinda Uvacha? Or there's so many different names of Krishna as we hear in the things like the Vishnu Sahasranam. Why is it specifically used Shri Bhagavan Uvacha? Because it's important for us to understand that this Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because with this understanding, then we're able to actually surrender to him, and we're actually able to accept instruction. Because this was Arjuna's position in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. This was his position that we find him in the Bhagavad Gita, is that he was looking for instruction. And we can see in the beginning, he's looking as Krishna as his friend because that was the relationship that he had. But finally, when he accepted Krishna as Bhagavan, when he accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then only he was able to take instruction. And we can see here, Prabhupada writes in the end of this purport that it is a duty of everyone, whoever and wherever one may be, to surrender completely unto him. It is not wonderful, therefore, that all transcendental controllers surrender to him and make all offerings of worship. So in one sense, it's being described here by Srila Prabhupada that people like Lord Brahma, Indra, and all these different great personalities that offer worship and prayers to the Supreme Lord, they say it is not, Prabhupada said it's not wonderful that they're doing this because they're just in their natural position of duty and of one in knowledge who is surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But we can see it's actually a very amazing and wonderful thing in this material world, because most people are in ignorance, for one to actually completely surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? It's described here that in one sense that it's not so wonderful that these transcendental controllers surrender unto him, because they actually have the knowledge that Krishna is tu Bhagavan Svayam, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that Krishna is Bhagavan. But we are actually here in this material world because we think that we can be Bhagavan, that we can be the Supreme Controller. And because of this, it is very wonderful when one actually accepts Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and offers him all worship, prayers, and respect, because it's not actually seen so much in this material world that one completely surrenders to Krishna. Of course, Srila Prabhupada says that even in 1 second we can actually fully surrender. But we can see practically for most people it's a long process. And it takes a while for some people to come to this high level of surrender. But we can see in the Bhagavad Gita, one just has to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One has to accept instructions from Bhagavan or the representative of Bhagavan. Right? We sing every single morning, Saksha Dharitve Nasamasha Shastra, Uktas Tatha Bhav Yatayeva Sadbi, Kintu Prabhuryav Priya Eva Tasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. That the spiritual master is described as being or deserving equal worship to that of the Supreme Lord, because he is the representative, because he gives this knowledge to everyone else that Krishna is Bhagavan. And by the mercy and instructions from the spiritual master, we can actually come to this understanding that Krishna is Bhagavan. And we can actually see Krishna for who he is, right? Because it's been described throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, throughout the Vedic literature, that one can only see properly if they hear properly. So we can actually see the Lord as Bhagavan. We can actually see Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, see Krishna as he is, by properly hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, by properly hearing from the spiritual master, then only can we properly see. And we can practically experience, because we go out and we speak to so many people, they don't know anything about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Or like I was speaking early on, they have their own idea of what is spiritual. They have their subjective idea about truth. We can see that this what's being described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, what's been described in the Bhagavad Gita, this is the absolute truth. Meaning that this isn't just based off of someone's different ideology, anyone's different philosophy that truth can change. Right? We can practically see that what one might think is good for them might not be good for someone else. As Chandan Acharya Prabhu was quoting in his class yesterday, that even very demoniac and evil people such as Hitler thought that what they were doing was good for them, and what they might have had some idea that, okay, I'm doing this for the benefit of society. But anyone with any intelligence can clearly see that what this person is doing is not good at all. So similarly with spirituality, right, we can see, because we go to so many spiritual conventions and we talk to so many people with so many different ideas, you can you can never expect what you're going to hear from these people. Once you think you've already heard everything, someone brings in something completely new and you're like, how the heck did this person come up with this philosophy? So you can see that the people, they actually have no understanding of the absolute truth. They have no nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they can't actually come to this understanding unless they receive these books that have been so eloquently written by Srila Prabhupada and by his faithful followers, where one can actually come to this platform of surrendering to Krishna by actually understanding that Krishna is Bhagavan. Krishna is tu Bhagavan Svayam. Where it doesn't just tell you on the first page that, okay, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that's it, you have to accept him, otherwise you're going to hell forever. It doesn't say that, but it describes, right? We can see that this Srimad Bhagavatam, this here, it's only the third canto, part 1. There's a total of 12 cantos in this amazing Vedic literature, where it describes through so many different pastimes of Krishna, Krishna's incarnations, and Krishna's associates, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we can see that in the Bhagavad Gita, it wasn't just enough for Arjuna to be like, okay, you know, I accept Krishna as Bhagavan and I surrender to you. But then Krishna spoke the whole Bhagavad Gita to explain to him why Krishna is Bhagavan. And he showed the universal form, like I was reading, he explained how he is the controller of the material nature, how he is the source of all the incarnations and all the spiritual and material energies. So when one actually gets these books of Srila Prabhupada, one can actually get this proper understanding, like I was saying, this Krishna's tu Bhagavan Svayam. So how else are they going to get these books and come to this understanding if we don't go out and distribute them? So that's why, for most of our time and most of our effort, it's engaged in this book distribution. Because this book distribution is actually the practical solution to bring people up to this platform of knowledge. Because how else will they know that Krishna is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead if they don't read the books of Srila Prabhupada, which tells you on every word, on every page, in every single analogy, pastime, circumstance, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And not only is Krishna the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but that we have to surrender to him. So these books, they're the cure for people's disease of this material world. So we should go out, we should distribute them, we should give them very liberally to anybody and everybody. It's described that we should be very liberal in the distribution of this knowledge, but very strict in the practical application. Because if you aren't very strict in the practical application, that's where all these different ideas come in. And you can see one might even read the books of Srila Prabhupada, and they're like, oh yeah, I read whole Bhagavad Gita and I realized that I was God. It's like, how the heck do you read the Bhagavad Gita and you come to the conclusion that, yeah, actually I am God? Where the heck does it ever say that? And that's why it's important that Prabhupada has written his Bhagavad Gita as it is. It is as it is because it doesn't have anyone else's mundane philosophy, anyone's mundane interpretation, anyone else's mundane idea. It is simply what Krishna spoke and how one can understand it. And one can see that Prabhupada's purports, they're perfectly in line with exactly what Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita. Right? There's this one verse in the Bhagavad Gita, I keep forgetting which one it is, but like the Mayavadis interpret it that like Krishna was impersonal before and he's become personal now. But if you take it with that understanding, the whole rest of the Bhagavad Gita doesn't make any sense at all.
724.
Yeah. Yeah, they take this verse where Krishna is saying, I don't know the Sanskrit. You can just go to the translation.
They say that I was non-manifested before and become personal now.
Yeah.
So Krishna says that here. I was impersonal before, and the unintelligent thing that I'm impersonal before and personality now.
Yeah.
So my body says
Yeah, so they by some Sanskrit word jugglery and Sanskrit grammar, they're able to adjust this verse to have the opposite meaning of what Krishna actually says. But we can see if you take this understanding, then the whole rest of the Bhagavad Gita doesn't make any sense at all. So we can see that Prabhupada's purports have so perfectly explained this Bhagavad Gita as it is, so we can perfectly come to this platform of understanding Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And once we come to this understanding, then we're actually able to relish Krishna's more personal pastimes like we read here in Krishna books. So many wonderful, amazing pastimes of the Lord are described, and they're actually very relishable and very amazing. And one can keep on reading them over and over and over again when one actually has this understanding of Krishna being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's why Prabhupada actually titled this Krishna book, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because if you just read through the pastimes, one might not necessarily come to the conclusion that, yes, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when one reads it with the understanding that has been given to us by Srila Prabhupada and by the Vedic literatures, we can practically understand that this Krishna is none other than that primeval Lord Govinda, is none other than Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I hope I didn't miss so much of anything. I know I kind of went over a lot in like a small time frame, but I'll end my class there. If there's any corrections, questions, or comments, I'll take those now. I know there isn't so much time, but...
And just that point of this this verse, and you're saying like looking at the rest of the Bhagavad Gita, I mean, you can examine it, and because in the 12th chapter, I think it's like text 3, Krishna explains that actually this path of impersonalism is very troublesome. It's either 12.2 or 12.3, one of the two. He says this path of impersonal is very troublesome. So naturally, you don't want to go through trouble. Is that 12? What is that? Keep going to the next one. One more. Yeah, here you go. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested impersonal feature of the supreme advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. So then, they'll say like that actually, when we quote this one, they'll say, well, path of bhakti is easy. You don't want to do something easy. Krishna gives you the path of bhakti because it's easy. But Krishna gives it because it's, practical. It's what works. And it's particularly this unmanifested thing, this idea of the Supreme being unmanifested and attached to that. But then Krishna later, again, Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mamnaskura, how do you make sense of that?
Yeah.
If you take the 7th chapter, and then again, sarva dharma parityaja. And there's just so many again and again, like Krishna's making the point. And so it's just like if we study it, it's just foolishness to think like that. And Prabhupada would say like that to his disciples. It was that instant where, I forget which particular disciple was saying that, looking at this translation that they were reading at the time, because Prabhupada didn't have his Bhagavad Gita out till a little bit later. I think it took about a year to get the Bhagavad Gita out. So they were reading, and Prabhupada would scream. Then why is he saying Krishna is impersonal? Why is he saying it's this Krishna, the unmanifested within? What kind of rascal is this?
Yeah.
So Prabhupada would be super heavy on this. And it's nice to go through the verses and make points where it's clear that there's a problem in the translation and understanding. So when you do face that, which you probably won't nowadays because nobody studies, but when you do face it, or people, sometimes Westerners study it more than Indians or any traditional people. So then you can those intelligent people that come, you can kind of defeat that pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for elaborating on that point. I was just saying thanks for elaborating further on that point. Ali Krishna Prabhu?
You kind of mentioned Vishnu isn't Bhagavan. How does it work? So he's an expansion from Krishna, Vishnu, all these three ones that were spoken about. But then you also were talking about this yogurt analogy. Is Vishnu the milk, unchanged, or
Yeah, so we can see that Krishna is actually the origin of all of these things, right? It was described in one of those purports that I was reading where in different instances, according to different circumstances, it's been described that, Shiva Bhagavan or Vishnu Bhagavan. But we can see that one who is actually Bhagavan, as I was describing, one who actually has these opulences at the highest level, one can't get any higher than the level of Krishna. That one can see people have so many opulences, people are in control of so many things, but no one actually has these to the high degree that Krishna does. So we can practically see that, one might say that, yogurt might not be better than milk, or paneer might not be better than milk. But we can see that it's from Krishna that all these things are coming from. Krishna is the origin of is the origin of all these things. And ultimately he's the controller of all of these things. So naturally he's Bhagavan because he has all these opulences to the highest degree. Even these 64 qualities that were described, I think you printed out that sheet where it has all of the qualities listed. And nobody else has these 4 mentioned qualities that Krishna has. So therefore he is Bhagavan.
The question is Vishnu also like yogurt?
Well, it was kind of like unclear whether like Vishnu is the same category like Shiva, like Brahma, like you're kind of.
This analogy specifically, I mean, with the yogurt is used for Shiva. So,
Yeah.
anyways, it gets confusing if you apply to Vishnu because Dipachir evehi dashantaram abhipetya Dipayate hetu samana dharma yastadir keva hicha Vishnutaya bhivati govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. This one's a better analogy when you give, like, because using Lord Brahma's, because Lord Brahma's.
Oh, like the candle one, right?
Yeah, because when you mention yogurt in reference to Vishnu, it doesn't actually like, because it's transformed. It's coming from the same place, but it's different. And Brahma in his prayers makes that point. So you can't use that same analogy for Vishnu.
I see.
So it's important that you just use like this is specific to Lord Vishnu. And so, it's Lord Vishnu is Vishnu Tattva, and there's Shiva Tattva. So it's important to like, anyways, you got like Vishnu Tattva, Jiva Tattva, and Shakti Tattva, and then you've got the external energy. So it's like, it's important to distinguish that Shiva Tattva falls within the middle, the marginal potency. Between the marginal and Vishnu Tattva is Shiva Tattva.
Yeah.
So then that's like slight difference. That's where the yogurt analogy comes in.
Yeah.
So not the same, but same and different.
Okay. Mataji's, any questions? Darva?
With a comment. So I was just thinking about, believe the second offense to the holy name, to consider the names of demigods like Shiva and Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. So if you really see people like Shiva and Brahma, they're guna avatars of Lord Krishna. So there's places in the Shastra where they're like also described as Bhagwan because,
Sometimes Bhagavan, Krishna takes that position also.
Yeah.
It's mentioned in the Bhagavatam a few times. Like you can take the position of Brahma and sometimes even Shiva. So it's mentioned like, okay.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.